On today's video, I'm going to share with you some tips to improve your photography from home. Now roll the intro. My first tip for you is to learn from previous street photographers. But I don't mean to just Googling them quickly and have a glance to their photos. I mean to properly sit down and study them and study their pictures, so you can determine the approach and technique they used that you can incorporate into your own work. To do this, I normally follow these steps to determine how they used to work. First, I try to find out what was their motivation to take pictures. Number 2, I find out what gear they use. And using these two, I can determine what was their approach on their work. So for today's example, I will tell you about Fan Ho, a Chinese street photographer. So first, let's find out the motivation of Fan Ho for taking pictures. Fan Ho was born in Shanghai, but then he later moved to Hong Kong. Once he was there, his dream was to become a novelist. He wanted to become a writer. But unfortunately, he was diagnosed with extreme migraines, and he had very strong headaches, and reading would make his pain worse. So the doctor recommended to have walks and to take some fresh air to improve his symptoms. And he did. But even though walking would make his pain better, he himself said that he felt a bit stupid just wandering the streets without any aim or point. And after seeing that, his dad bought him his first camera. He then took some pictures with this camera, he signed up for a contest, and he won first prize. And that's how his career in photography started. Now let's move on to number 2, his gear. During his whole career, he used to use a camera very similar to this one, a Rolleiflex. And if you have used a camera like this, even though they are really good, they're a bit bulky and cumbersome, and they don't allow the photographer to react quickly to a candid moment. So now let's keep this in mind when we study his work, and you will see how this will help us to determine how or what techniques he used to apply for his photography. So now finally let's move to his approach. And to do this, we will just look at some of his best photos. First, let's have a look to these two images here. One of the things that you can notice is that the background is the same. So this suggests that he used to first find a nice spot with a nice composition with interesting lighting, and then he will patiently go there and wait for the right subjects. And that's exactly what is happening here, because he had this large camera and he was not able to react very fast. Then he will just find a nice background with nice lighting, and he would just wait for the subjects to come into the frame. And these two other photos prove this point even further. You can see that the place, the location, and even the angle is the same that the previous two photos. And he was able to produce very different results by just having different light conditions and also different subjects. But he always used to come back to the same places and wait. And look at this last example for this place and this location and background. He just waited for the right subject, and by doing that, he produced a very different result even though he was in the same location. So now we have already identified one of his main approaches or techniques. He will find a nice place with nice composition, nice background, and he will just wait there for the right subjects to come in. Once again, on this example, you can see that he applied the same approach. He found a nice location with a nice composition and a nice angle, and he waited there for the right subjects, and he got beautiful results once again. Now moving on, now that we know that he used to like to choose specific locations, he also knew how to apply what I like to call the D.I.E technique. And D.I.E stands for Design, Information, and Emotions. If you're able to capture these three elements in your picture, they are very likely to be keepers. So in this example, in the photo on the left, you can see that he managed to compose the picture very nicely. Then the wide angle of the lens allowed to include some of the background so we can learn and have some information of the context. But then look at the little girl that she's crying or screaming. And this is showing human emotion. And this is what makes this photo works, is adding an impact to the whole picture. And on this other image, again, he implemented the D.I.E approach because there is a good design on the composition of the kids sitting on the sidewall. There is information because we kind of see where the kids were in front of a shop. And then we have the emotion of the kids as well, which again is what makes this photo work. So also keep that one in mind. The D.I.E technique: design, information, and emotion. And finally, another thing that we can learn from Fan Ho is that we shouldn't be afraid of editing our photos. Fan Ho is also very well known for editing, cropping, and modifying the contrast of his photos on the darkroom. Look at these examples here. The picture on the left is one of his most famous work. And on this image, what makes the picture work is that diagonal of the shadows in middle of the frame. But this was not actually a real shadow he added in the black room. But you can see how, by doing some post-processing, he managed to increase the impact of the photo. And the same applies to the other picture. We know that he used a Rolleiflex throughout his career. So the aspect of his photos would normally be a square 6x6, but you can see in here how he heavily cropped the picture to make the composition work with the tram rail tracks. And in this example, something similar. He again cropped the photo to make the composition improved, and on the other image he also used double exposure in the darkroom to improve the design of the photo. So hopefully by now you are able to apply these 3 steps to any street photographer that you like. First, you determine what was their motivation, secondly the gear, and by knowing these two, you can find out or figure out what approach they use in their pictures, and then you can implement it for yourself. And now, my tip number 2 is to start getting and studying photo books of street photography. And now I will show you how I normally do to study them properly. Let me show you now quickly what I do when I go through my street photography book to highlight the photos I like the most. So for this example, I'm going to show you this photo book. I really recommend it in case you don't have it yet. This is Magnum contact sheets and includes many contact sheets from the Magnum collection or archive. And it's particularly nice because you can see all of the frames in one roll. So it will tell you how the photographer worked out his way into the final best picture that it was selected for printing later on. So normally what I would do is to sit down and go through the photo book, and I will have those kind of sticky notes handy. So every time I see a photo that I like, I will just stick one of the notes on the page, and there is something that I particularly like a nice comment, then I will add a note as well. And in that way, every time I want to find inspiration or before a photo walk, I can sit down and quickly find the photos I like the most on each of the photo books. So I do the same for every of my books in my collection. And when I do that, I always keep in mind what we already discussed about D.I.E, of design, information, and emotion. More often than not, the pictures I like the most will have those 3 elements. Okay, that's all for today. I hope this was useful for you and that you can apply these techniques now, so every time that you are not able to be out there on the streets and taking pictures, at least you can improve your skills at home by applying this approach. And I will see you on the next one. Now keep taking photos and enjoy.